And recording has just started there for everybody. So if you're okay with that there. And as I said, I'm Anna Connaughton. I've worked here in the research office with TUS, and we are based over 7 campuses, and we are based along the River Shannon. It's really from Athlone to Limerick. Here in TUS, we deliver regional relevant research and are committed to nurturing innovation enterprises and building global competitiveness. I am glad today and delighted to welcome Kieran Fagan from Vara here in the call. Kieran is going to present the content for most of the week. And Kieran has extensive experience in strategic business growth, innovation management, and commercialization, which made him an ideal partner for us in this first program that we're delivering here. He has a proven track record supporting universities, enterprise and research teams across Ireland and the UK and internationally. And we'll also have some guest lecturers here in the week and speakers as well to help deliver practical insights of the customer discovery, value proposition, and innovation to commercialization. So I'll hand over to Kieran, who's going to take you through the week and the assignment, if that's all right. And everybody have a great week. And if you have any questions, pop them into the chat there and we'll read them out as we go.
Anna, thank you very much for that warm introduction. Hello, everyone. Delighted to be here. Really looking forward to working with you all throughout the week. As Anna said, my name is Kieran Fagan. I'm here to deliver a number of sessions over the week that I suppose supports a lean startup journey, a hypothesis-driven journey, presenting useful toolkits for people with ideas, helping you to frame your idea, helping you to validate whether there's actually a market for your idea, and all of the key considerations around that, if you like, and some very useful tips and traps to help you along your way. So as Anna has indicated, we as a consultancy company, we provide professional services to both small to medium-sized enterprises on mostly innovation management and to third-level sectors, universities, RPOs across Ireland, UK, Sweden, actually over the last 12 months. And that primarily focuses on supporting commercialization. So my mantra, and you'll hear me say this a few times this morning, is customers don't really care about ideas, don't really care about products, don't really care about technology or research. That's an unfortunate reality for a lot of researchers, but it's a good thing when you do understand what they actually care about, and they care about their own problems. So if you can make a solution, a technology, a product, solve a problem and align with that problem, that's where there is the potential for success, if you like. So we provide a lot of that kind of support. We provide business development support, and we also do a lot of this kind of activity, lean startup training, and helping people to crystallize their thinking, if you like, and do things in a way which increases the probability of success. Customer discovery is something that we do. We don't just tell people how to do this or read it from a book. We actually do this sort of stuff ourselves. This is just a logo spray of a number of companies that we reached out to and spoke to on behalf of clients within 3 months of this year. So we're very well versed in the whole area of customer discovery, and customer discovery is a topic that we'll be covering this week. I think I'm covering that off tomorrow. So lean startup. Why lean startup? Hopefully, you will all have an appreciation that your number one job as people who have ideas, who are perhaps interested in the whole area of entrepreneurship and would like to progress those ideas. So your number one job is to challenge and test your idea. Why? To reduce the risk of failure. And that's what all of this is about, is really to try and reduce your risk of failure and try and ensure or increase your probability of success. And when you look at the statistics, the number one reason why startups fail is because there's no market need. So a lot of this is very much focused on helping you to determine if there is a market need, or where the market need is if it isn't where you first thought it was. Okay, so very important consideration. So lean startup, it all started with or a lot of it started with a book written by a gentleman called Eric Ries, called The Lean Startup. And the whole philosophy essentially applies lean manufacturing practices to startups. So it has that appreciation that a high number of startups fail, but also that a lot of those failures are entirely preventable. And so it's an approach that's adopted right across the globe over the last, I'm going to say, 12 to 15 years, changing the way companies are built and changing how new products are launched. So it's not only, or doesn't only apply as a methodology for startups, it also applies as a methodology for large companies and corporates as well. And a lot of these tools are used within companies. So it's about working smarter. Instead of can this product be built, it takes a step back and thinks about, well, should this product be built? Is there a viable and sustainable business around this product or service? Is there a viable and sustainable business model? Is there a business model that might perhaps allow this business to scale more quickly or become a larger entity? But fundamentally, it's about understanding and addressing real world problems and really honing in on that area of problems and pains and challenges, and ensuring that the solution is actually of value to actual customers who have real problems, and really digging into and understanding all of that. And ultimately, I mean, it's often called evidence-based entrepreneurship. So you're reducing that risk of failure through validated learning. So coming up with your hypotheses and then going off and validating your assumptions, or invalidating your assumptions, but ultimately coming to a closer view of what actually will work. It emphasizes, and a big challenge with people who are technically minded is, you fundamentally believe your technology is brilliant or your idea is brilliant, and that everyone will want one. The market will beat a path to your door, and that is never the case. And so it emphasizes customer centricity. So it's looking at the world through the eyes of the customer. Rapid experimentation to validate or invalidate certain aspects of your idea, but fundamentally focused on continuously innovating and improving. As I said, it's based on lean manufacturing principles and practices, but fundamentally it's about reducing that risk and uncertainty in the development processes. And we go through a lot of this: testing assumptions, validating hypotheses, iterating, etc., etc. But fundamentally, as I say, it's about building something that customers actually want, and trying to take that wasted time and effort, that wasted expenditure out of the process. Pre-lean startup, there was a sort of if you like, a product death cycle. There was a product built. The reaction to that product in the marketplace wasn't as good as one would have hoped. No one was using it, or few people were using it. People went out and asked, well, what's missing here? What features do we incorporate? The missing features were incorporated, and no one continued to use the product, or a low number of people continued to use the product. So that's what's known as the product death cycle. With lean startup, the lean startup era, There's a beginning. The beginning point is, well, before we build anything, let's talk to people. So let's hypothesize. Let's actually go out there with customers and have conversations, or let's test. You know, sort of uh, some form of prototype or minimum viable product. Let's test that hypothesis. Let's validate or invalidate. But ultimately, there are stage gates built within the process that will allow you to determine whether I should stop or progress. So this is very much the ethos, if you like, of lean and lean startup. So as you've heard me say already, customers, you know, for those of you with ideas, customers don't really care about those ideas or those solutions. They only care about their own problems, or I could frame it and say they only care about their own problems and opportunities. And but fundamentally, it's the way that customers see the problem that's most important, and equally their motivation to solve it. So try to get into the mindset of being very curious about the problem and understanding whether that problem is something that there is a need for, a strong need for, a must-have need for a solution. You therefore need to understand potential customers' problems and motivations extremely well if you are intent on progressing your idea. And the key challenge for startups or for technically minded individuals is that you'll spend too much time talking, explaining your solution. And you don't spend enough time trying to understand that problem that I've been talking about. And for a lot of you who aren't used to it, you don't know how to engage the market effectively. You don't know what questions to ask and how to frame those questions to get the information you need to inform the opportunity. So these are key challenges for technically minded people, but there are ways and means to overcome that through effective training. So look, a quick video here just to demonstrate perhaps how not to communicate your solution. And it as you would expect, it comes at it from a fairly extreme perspective.
Hey, I've got a great idea for a business.
That's exciting. Tell me about it.
I've developed a chemical isomer that links to volatile organic compounds causing carbon bonds to rupture and wraps them in a nanotube coating.
Huh. That's a little confusing. Can you dumb it down for me?
Sure. What I do is I take a proprietary isomer that I developed with a picric acid wash that hollows out the carbon bonds and replaces them with a nanotube wrapping.
Okay, so I guess it's pretty technical.
Oh yeah. I've been working on this isomer for 9 years.
So what's the business idea?
To sell it.
To who?
Everybody will want one.
What for?
So they can wrap their volatile organic compounds in carbon nanotubes.
I think you might need a target customer. I don't think I need to wrap my compounds in your nanotube.
Well, maybe not you.
So, for people who buy it, what's the value you are providing them?
I've developed a chemical isomer that links to volatile organic compounds causing carbon bonds to rupture and wraps them in a nanotube coating.
You've said that already. This is getting annoying. Why should anyone care about your isomer?
I spent 9 years on this.
I know that. Okay, pretend I'm an investor. How can I make money off your product?
By selling it.
You're a smart guy, but try not to think like a scientist. Think like a business person.
Okay. Value chain. Term sheet.
I have to go now and answer that.
That's not your phone.
I know.
So, as I said, quite an extreme example, but it demonstrates a particular point that most people who are involved in technology transfer, for example, in universities, when they see that video for the first time, they'll look at it and go, that is my life. that is that is the challenge I face every day in dealing with technically minded people. So I want to introduce you to just a very simple exercise called the verbal business card. So the verbal business card is a way of framing your idea so that potential customers can at least understand where you're coming from. And so I often use the analogy, imagine you're going into a room, and that room is full of either business people or investors, and you want to introduce yourself, but introduce yourself in a way that gets them curious, slightly curious about what your idea is. So you're coming in with an idea, you're looking to socialize that idea and get some thoughts or feedback or get some interest. And so it's how to communicate that in a way that might get that interest or might get them responding with, oh, that sounds interesting. Tell me more. So it follows the format. We believe we can solve these types of problems for these types of customers using, we call it X. So in other words, you don't even mention the technology. You don't describe the technology. You don't wax lyrical about your idea. If it's a product, if it's a software, if it's a algorithm, if it's a chemical formulation, you don't get into that at all. You focus only on the problems and the customer. So, simple example. We believe, or examples, we believe we can recycle polyester from used clothing and turn it into virgin quality material for the textile and recycling industry. So the problem is that polyester is hard to recycle. Polyester, should I say, from used clothing is hard to recycle. And turning it into the material that it originally came from is very difficult as well. And there's a number of projects going on around the world that are trying to do this in a certain way, in a non-mechanical way, shall we say. And the customer is the sector, the textile industry, where the likes of Primark, the likes of Zara are all under pressure, because there will be legislation, if you like, that's coming in, if it's not already in, to mandate them to take back used clothing, that whole fast fashion industry. And this technology actually was developed in the Technological University of the Shannon. So this is a TUS tech. Another example, then, we believe we can enhance early detection and intervention for neurodegenerative diseases in older adults for healthcare organizations using X. And I suppose a consideration here is there's an assumption that ultimately it's probably not the patient who's going to be the customer here. It's probably going to be the healthcare organizations. But fundamentally, the problem is that neurodegenerative diseases are increasingly common, and catching them early is difficult. It's problematic. It's a challenge, and ultimately intervening at that early stage is a problem and a challenge. So that's a very simple way to frame the idea. Now, I'm not getting into any descriptions around the solution here. So I'm not getting into the fact that in example one, we're talking about a fairly sophisticated chemical recycling process, that uses reactive extrusion and lots of very fancy ingredients to do what it does. I'm not getting into that at all, but a technical person would want to jump into that way of describing the idea. I'm not doing that, and I'm also not getting into the fancy algorithms that are used to pick up on the neurodegenerative diseases either. I'm not getting into the technology description. A couple of simple other ones. We believe we can augment renewable energy asset contribution to the energy mix and lower energy bills for energy consumers using X. Okay, so this is if you like this is a way of framing the idea so that the way you think about it is different, but ultimately the way that a potential customer relates to it is slightly is better. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense. I'd like you. I just move ahead. So I'd like you, for those of you with ideas, I'd like you to take 5 minutes to have a think about and perhaps write down what is your verbal business card. Does that make sense? Everyone happy to have a go at that? Yeah, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Perfect. Just take 5 minutes to have a go at that, please. And any questions you have, please ask. I believe there was an issue with my sound there, so apologies for that. I'll seek to rectify that and ensure that it doesn't happen again. I'll just go back so that you can see the format. We believe we can solve these types of problems for these types of customers using, we'll call it X.
Yeah, I'll go. I'll do it.
Perfect. Barry, is it?
Yeah.
Go for it then.
So mine is we believe we can prevent burnout for corporate workers aged 30 to 50.
Okay, we believe we can. Okay, so there's a problem there with burnout. There's a consequence to that problem in the form of absenteeism for companies,
Yeah.
presenteeism perhaps from companies, attrition, people leaving their jobs, etc.
Yeah.
So there's a consequence. Okay, brilliant. And your customers, it's worth thinking about who your customer is. So your customer might be the individuals themselves, or the customer might actually be their employer.
We have a few in the chat there as well. Sean O'Farrell says his statement is, we believe we can solve the disconnect from real food and nature among children, society and businesses using X.
Okay. So again,
Thanks
it's
for that
worth
feedback there, Karen, by the way. Thanks.
no problem at all, Barry. It's worth also thinking about this one from the perspective of what the consequence is of there being a disconnect from real food and nature. So the problem may not necessarily be the root cause of the problem might be that there's a disconnect there, but it's worth thinking about the consequence as well, because quite often the consequence of a problem is what will interest the customers because they're experiencing the consequence of what you're talking about here. So, you know, if your potential customers are parents, your parents might be experiencing issues, health-related issues. I'm just spitballing here. Attention deficit disorders, whatever the consequence of what we're talking about here is, that could be the real problem. And they're very, very motivated towards a solution to that problem, and this could be one way of addressing it. Does that make sense, Sean?
Yeah, I was going to say, Kieran, as well, there's a small class here today. So, you know, if you feel you want to take off your mics, feel free to do so. Put your hands up and you can chat away, because we do have small numbers here. Sean has just come back and said, perfect. So we have another one in the chat there. Yuri, if I'm pronouncing that right. So we help startups developing deep tech for defense and space to get funding by deploying our networks. And in brackets, there's just This is just an example, not a promise.
Okay, brilliant. Um, Thank you, Yuri. Yeah, I mean, look, if the challenge is getting funding, getting funding is never easy, and there can be lots of reasons for that. In terms of, look, there can be some of the stuff we're talking about here today. Funders like to see that you're addressing real problems, how to frame that, how to put that into a quality funding application form, and how to tick all of their boxes. So fundamentally, yes. I mean, you can start thinking about this from well, who is our customer? Is our customer universities? Is our customer entrepreneurs and startups? Is our customer large corporates? What is their challenge, and why do they have that challenge? Is it just down to the fact that they don't have the talent that can pull together a high quality funding application to increase their chances of success? So yeah, I mean, yeah, we address the problem of inability to secure funding, whatever the underlying causes of that are within organizations or within startup teams. And so brilliant.
We have another few coming in there. So we have Ian Hasleys from TUS, and we help enterprise customers future-proof their digital transformations by IPv6 adoption as a strategic move for agility and growth.
There we go. We're getting a little technical now. But yeah, I mean, look, digital transformation is a very broad term. So it's worth you digging into that to say, well, what's the challenge? What's the problem that this digital transformation will address? They will know we're experiencing this issue right now. We're deploying too many resources for doing some specific tasks, or we're spending too much money, or we're devoting too many people, or we are experiencing, problems with downtime or whatever that is. There's going to be underlying problems there that will, or it could be just a pure competitive issue, whereby, lots of their competitors out in the marketplace are, doing things digitally, that is giving them a competitive advantage. And, as some customers might be falling behind because they don't have that. But it's worth understanding the specific problem, and then whether IPv6 adoption is the best way to address that. So there's a lot of work, I suppose, to really validate all of that. But it's a good starting point to say, okay, well, we have assumptions, that there is a need for this, and then go off and validate those assumptions. So well done, Ian.
Yeah, well, if I could just jump in, Kieran, yeah?
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose just like a bit of assistance in actually trying with something that's as complex as IPv6 and as new, but something that's absolutely required. So I suppose in the first place, are you familiar with IPv6 or?
Being honest, I'm not. No, I do. I'm aware of a lot of, protocols that exist without getting into the detail of lots of them. So I understand the broad concept, but I wouldn't be over the detail of IPv6 specifically.
Yeah, I suppose I suppose like so what I and I've been at this a while, in trying to do exactly what you're saying, which is to simplify the message to get attention, because it's not working out very well, to be honest.
Yeah.
But in simple terms, and it's really important, and I think it's not really important just because I'm interested in it, but it is actually for the future growth of digital internet connectivity. The original version of the Internet Protocol, which for everyone listening who's on this call, has a unique IP address that connects. That's how we're speaking to each other. Yep. So the original version that was created in the 1980s, the addresses are gone. They're used up. So there's an actual real requirement. The other piece is that the new version has a limitless number of addresses. And what it does, it allows every device potentially on the planet to communicate directly with each other. So again, as of now, large parts of the internet have adopted it. There's almost 50% of the internet using IPv6. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is this is one of these things that's being used, but very few people are talking about it. In TUS Athlone, we have deployed it 12 years ago. Our full infrastructure is completely supports the product. So people ask, so what does it do? Your question, what problem does it fix? It fixed by actually probably the most critical thing of today, as in dealing with cybersecurity. So I suppose that's just and it's not a brief area, but I suppose it's like with something as broad and deep as that. Any suggestions on again as to how you simplify it down, because you do actually have to get to the point of what you're talking about too.
Yeah. No, look, there are ways. I mean, ultimately, it's coming down to how will these potential customers relate to it in terms of what they're experiencing or what they know might be coming down the track. So look, I'm more than happy, Ian, because we don't have the time obviously to delve into great detail around individual projects on this type of 2-hour session. More than happy to have a separate session with you and chat about it. But there will be ways and means of framing this in a way that people can A, understand it, and B, relate to it as it might apply to them.
Thank you.
No
We have another
problem at
one
all.
there, Kieran, from Sandra Costa from IPCA. My team have developed a prototype for heart health monitoring. It provides faster, more reliable detection of cardiac issues, helping clinicians save time and improve patient outcomes.
Yeah, well, look, the whole in healthcare, medical devices, etc., saving time, reducing the time to diagnosis, reducing hospital overnight stays, reducing the consequence of the problem if it were to last for long periods of time, are all well known and well versed ways of framing solutions within healthcare. So yeah, I mean, if you can say we address the problem of long duration to diagnosis and heart related issues and the time spent treating symptoms of the issue, you're definitely onto something there, and there are fairly easy and well tested ways of framing that. And fundamentally, then it's about really digging into the problem. And I have a few tools, Sandra, that I'll show you, some of which you may be familiar with, that really sort of allows you to dig into what I call the customer jobs, pains and gains. And I actually have a couple of slides that demonstrates how you might do that from a healthcare perspective or from a diagnostic perspective. So that's in a few slides time. So we'll cover off a wee bit of that today. So yeah, look, completely understand what you're doing. I've actually worked on a few. So yeah, the black boxes. My apologies. So the black boxes are my reading the messages. So apologies about that. That's just the chat box that jumps up. Okay, so look, yeah, we'll cover that in a while, Sandra. So look, well done, everyone. Good to get you thinking about your own ideas, and hopefully for those of you that are watching the workshop after the event, you'll be able to apply some of these tools to your own ideas as well. So, and by the way, increasingly, I am seeing the use of and having to coach in the use of generative AI to assist with some of these exercises. So I have an appreciation that, people are probably going to go off and use ChatGPT or Grok or some of these other tools themselves. I need to ensure that I'm teaching them how to do it properly. So look, I think it is very important that I suppose we all in our jobs have a good sound appreciation of generative AI and how it might apply to our businesses, and ultimately embrace some of these tools to accelerate the progression of our ideas. So look, AI is a moving target. Business not only as tools to assist in the whole startup process, but business models increasingly are also having to look at and consider how generative AI could play a role. But fundamentally, we can't be reliant upon it. Certainly in terms of guiding some of these processes that I'm talking to you about today. It has to be balanced. There has to be a balance, if you like, between what it spits out, what it gives you, and your own creativity and your own judgment. So everything that it generates needs to be questioned and needs to be challenged, but certainly a very good way of getting you over the blank page barrier, if you like, and putting something down, giving you something as a base to work from. But it has application right across ideation, right across the verbal business, the verbal business card, the value proposition, design, business model design, all of these canvases, customer discovery, funding applications, pitch preparation. It can play a role to support all of that for sure. Some simple tips around that is, for when you're putting in a prompt for some of this kind of stuff, clearly state your main goal with specifics, specify the exact output structure that you require, any relevant background that can inform it to give the best, so to enable it to give the best possible response, any relevant documents, highlighting potential pitfalls that you might be aware of for accuracy considerations, and being careful about intellectual property. So don't be putting your secret sauce in the same way that you wouldn't disclose to another individual or third party, particularly for something that has the potential to be protectable. You wouldn't disclose it to ChatGPT or any other generative AI tool either. But look, something just to show you very, very simply, I'd like to create a verbal business card. It should follow the format of, and you give it the format. You could just say, I am a student entrepreneur working on using advanced computer vision models. We can detect accurately in real time and seamlessly detect mold in buildings and accurately refer qualified professionals to handle the remediation. So if that's the description of the idea, then you can ask it to generate a verbal business card for you. But fundamentally, you'd want to then question that, check that, validate that, perhaps tweak that so that it's more relevant to what you know. But it certainly gives you a good starter for 6, if you like. And I would use it quite regularly for consultative projects too. So introduction to business model design and value proposition. Show of hands, how many people are aware of some of these tools, like, for example, the value proposition canvas and the business model canvas? Just a quick show of hands. Barry, yeah. Okay, not too many others. Okay, so first time for quite a few of you. So the business model canvas, I'll just show you the proper version of it. So the business model canvas is a tool developed by a Swiss academic, as was, or 2 Swiss academics, should I say, Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Pigneur. So Alexander Osterwalder then has gone on to become an international thought leader, if you like, set up a business called Strategizer, and goes around the world delivering master classes on a lot of this kind of subject matter. But the business model canvas was his own and Eve's invention going back probably about 15 or 16 years ago. And it's used very extensively by startups and by corporates to really hone in on developing business models that can help businesses to grow, and fundamentally to validate or use these tools as ways to validate not just that there is a value proposition there, but to validate all aspects of running a business. So, I'm old enough to remember the day that the business plan was the primary instrument. And before seeking funding or before doing anything, you were encouraged to develop a business plan. And some of these business plans can run from 20 pages to 50 or 100 pages. A lot of effort and time, and quite often they're out of date within weeks of having been written, and they're there to tick a box. And they're not really that good for focusing in on the early stage of an idea where everything is fluid and everything changes very, very quickly. So that's what this tool was developed for, to focus in on that sort of early fluid time of trying to shape ideas, trying to test ideas, trying to see what might work and what might not. So it's, as a lot of these tools are, they're about crystallizing your thinking, but crystallizing in your thinking in a way that they can be used as a tool to iterate and move forward. So, simple, before I get into it, so a simple analogy here of the business model canvas. The analogy that I'm using here is a theatre analogy. Okay, so down the middle, you have your value proposition column. And the value proposition, using the theatre analogy, is the performance. That's the show on the stage that all of the people to the right-hand side, the customers, are there to see. They're there to be entertained by that value that's provided through that performance on the stage. Okay, so that's the value proposition. As I said, to the far right, that's your customers. Your customers broken down into various categories and segments, etc. But that's your customers. And in between the performance, the stage, and your customers, you have your channels to market, your route to market. You have all of the ways in which you transact, if you like, with those customers, be that over-the-counter sales, be that online ticketing platforms. In Ireland, we have Ticketmaster, but there are lots of them all around the world, etc. So all of the ways that you transact with customers, and you also have customer relationships. So how you establish, maintain, and grow the relationships with both potential and existing customers, and that might be through marketing effort, it might be through account management. There's various ways in which you can obviously maintain those relationships. Behind the stage, so to the left-hand side of that middle value proposition column, you have all of the things, all of the activities, all of the resources that are required to deliver that performance. And so at just directly behind the stage, you have two columns there. One is key activities, and that's all of the things within your control that you can do to help deliver that performance. In the case of the theatre analogy, that might be the activities of the logistics, preparing everything, getting all of the costumes to the right venue at the right time. It can be, all of the script writing, it can be all of the procurement for all of the various things that are needed, props, etc., etc. And so that's the activities. Below that, there's the key resources. So it's all of the things that you need, all of the items, the assets, all of the things that are required. And that might be the costumes themselves, it might be the props themselves, it might be the actors, the staff, etc., etc. So those are the key resources. And then to the very far left-hand side, you have the key partners. So the key partners are the organizations, perhaps, or the individuals that are not within your control. So in other words, they're third-party organizations, but they're plugging gaps. They're the organizations that that you need because you can't do this activity yourself, or that they have the resources that you don't have. So they're the key partners. Everything behind the stage, everything to the left-hand side of that value proposition column drives cost. And all of that cost is itemized to the bottom left-hand side. And similarly, on the bottom right-hand side, all of those customers purchasing tickets, buying whatever they're buying, those customers generate revenue. And to have a profitable business model, the total figure on the bottom right needs to be greater than the total figure on the bottom left, or at least the same as to break even. So that's just a very simple way of trying to get you to think about how the business model could operate. I'll delve into a little bit more detail now on the next slide, just with a short video.
An organization's business model can be described with 9 basic building blocks: your customer segments, your value proposition for each segment, the channels to reach customers, customer relationships you establish, the revenue streams you generate, the key resources and key activities you require to create value, the key partners, and the cost structure of the business model. But it's not sufficient to just enumerate the 9 building blocks. What you really want to do is to map them out on a pre-structured canvas. This is what we call the business model canvas, a tool that helps you map, discuss, design, and invent new business models. Let's briefly go through the 9 building blocks, starting with the customer segments. These are all the people or organizations for which you're creating value. This includes simple users and paying customers. For each segment, you have a specific value proposition. These are the bundles of products and services that create value for your customers. The channels describe through which touchpoints you're interacting with customers and delivering value. The customer relationships outline the type of relationship you're establishing with your customers. The revenue streams make clear how and through which pricing mechanisms your business model is capturing value. Then you need to describe the infrastructure to create, deliver, and capture value. The key resources show which assets are indispensable in your business model. The key activities show which things you really need to be able to perform well. The key partners show who can help you leverage your business model, since you won't own all key resources yourself, nor will you perform all key activities. Then once you understand your business model's infrastructure, you'll also have an idea of its cost structure. So with the business model canvas, you can map out your entire business model in one image. This works for startup entrepreneurs just as well as for the most senior executives.
Business model canvas is widely used, as I've mentioned. For example, in Ireland, it would be expected that universities would, if they're seeking funding to progress a project from a commercial perspective, that they would supply an initial version of the business model canvas. And if I am doing a commercial feasibility, so if a university has approached me to say, look, we have a piece of technology, we would like a commercialization consultant to come in and to really help us to understand this. And a part of that would require me to undertake some customer discovery activity. Then I'm developing an initial version of this, and I'm validating that or invalidating that as I progress through the project. I'm using that as a tool to try and get to a closer version of what will be successful from a commercial perspective. So you can see here all of the things that I talked about when I used the theatre analogy. Down the middle, the value propositions, the value we create. And in a few subsequent slides, I'm going to be honing in on value proposition and what value proposition is and what it isn't. You can see then to the right-hand side, the customers, and that's where you list out the customer segments and perhaps some organizations within those segments. And you just list those out within your business model canvas. And then in between, I mentioned the types of relationships, how you develop those relationships through various activities. I mentioned the channels to reach customers, and that might be direct contact, B2B, business to business. It might be through online channels. It might be through traditional retail. You know, it's all going to be very specific to each individual project, and it's worth considering. You'll come up with some initial assumptions, and they may not be correct. But you can determine all of that through customer discovery, and customer discovery we'll talk about tomorrow. So there is, sorry, just bear with me here. Okay, Anna, just want to make sure that you weren't trying to make me aware of something there. So, and then, you know, as I said, down below in the bottom right, all of the ways in which you generate revenue. That might be, if you're software, it might be SaaS, software as a service, subscription where customers pay monthly, or it might be transactional, you know, where it's a one-off, we're buying a product, or it might be consultancy, where you're selling time. So there's lots of different ways, obviously, of making money. And then behind the stage, to the left-hand side of the value proposition canvas, there's all of those key activities: marketing, business development, product development, research and development. You know, whatever those activities are, you really hone in on those there and have a good long think about what they are, what they need to be, and the assets, the resources, the things that you need, and that can include intellectual property, like patents, etc. And then the partners that you need to leverage your business. So those partners that fill gaps that you can't do yourself within your key activities and key resources. And quite often that can be a university. A university can be an R&D partner or development partner, where, you know, you need to include them within your key partners. And then, you know, all of the ways in which you spend money, you know, all of the costs that you incur. That might be customer acquisition costs. It might be the R&D itself. It might be capital expenditure, and a big one for a lot of startups can be payroll and salaries, etc. And so that's where you include that too. So to give you a very simple example here, widely used example. So Nespresso. So originally, Nespresso had a business model whereby they had developed machines and sold those machines to households and offices, coffee machines, obviously. And they sold them through retail. Very simple model. They didn't make the machines themselves. They subcontracted that out to key partners, machine manufacturers. But fundamentally, they generated their revenue through machine sales. And obviously they had costs of machine manufacturers, manufacturing, and whatever other salary costs they might have had internally. But they wanted to, through an innovation management process, they wanted to develop their business, they wanted to develop their business model, they wanted to grow their business. And a simple iteration, if you like, of the business model canvas shows how that came about and the key considerations that were taken into account for Nespresso. So fundamentally, households and offices were still their customers. So it's getting more revenue from the same customer segments, if you like, and perhaps growing those, growing the number within each segment. And they had to look at, well, their value proposition changed. They were no longer just selling innovative machines. They were also developing this pod concept of packaging coffee within a pod that goes into the machine, and that obviously does what a lot of us are now familiar with. And there was accessories that went with that. So they were developing a whole brand, a whole movement, if you like, that went with the whole Nespresso package. The challenge to market changed. So yes, they still sold through retail, but they also set up their own online presence. They also set up mail order and call centers as ways of engaging with customers to transact with those customers. Nespresso stores, pop-up stores within existing large department stores, etc., form part of the channels to market. They developed this concept called an Nespresso Club that allowed them to develop relationships with customers and send promotions and all of this kind of stuff also. Obviously, machine sales, was still a revenue stream, an upfront transactional cost, but they also then formed this repeat business model of selling the coffee, repetitive repetitive sales, through selling the pods. To the left-hand side, then they had lots of new activities that had to come into play with this new business model. So they had marketing, they had business to consumer distribution as a key activity. They had production, something that they didn't do heretofore, if you like, and that they need to include as well. And that may have just been assembly. The key resources, they had patents, they had production facilities, they had coffee as a key resource, obviously, which they didn't need to think about prior to with the last business model. They still had the machine manufacturers as key partners, but they also needed coffee growers as a key partner as well to deliver this business model. The costs changed, the business, the marketing and the branding, the production, the business to consumer distribution, the salary, there's lots of other detail that go in here. But just to demonstrate the difference in the two business models, you can see how the business model canvas was a useful tool to have a think about what changes need to happen to deliver this evolved business model, and to allow us to challenge the business model to get it to the point where it could be one that would work very well and very effectively. So they might have went through 20 different iterations before getting to this point. So this is showing you the before and after, if you like. But we're all familiar, I think, with the brand, and it's a very successful brand, and it's a good way just of demonstrating the business model canvas. So just as before we get into the next piece, I know through InnoBoost, I think there's short exercises that are being set for you. I know in the previous weeks you've been asked to undertake short exercises following each week to be submitted the following week. So we're suggesting that perhaps for your idea or for an idea, even if you don't have one yourself, that you have a go at completing your own business model canvas. Now, the first version of this will be assumptions, your best assumptions, your best guess for each of these sections. But I would ask you to pay particular attention to the value proposition column. And as I said, I'm going to be covering off value proposition now before the end of today's session, and the customer segment column. So pay particular attention to those, but have a go at the whole canvas. And if you would, perhaps you could submit that back to us by 12 o'clock Central European time next Monday. So that's Monday, the 6th of October. Is that okay? Does that make sense? We've included, I mean, there's numerous ways you can do this. There are 2 online platforms for the business model canvas. There are Canvanizer is one that I use. I've provided a Word document with the business model canvas template within it, so that's there and available for you to use. You can obviously change your text size to get more detail into each of the columns, should you wish. But look, have a go at it. It's a tool that if anyone is interested in startup, commercialization, progressing an idea, it's a tool that you really do need to be familiar with, and that you do need to use. So I'd encourage you to have a go with that. Anna, do you want to cover off that question there, just of where that should be sent to? You're just unmute there.
So I know there was initial information sent out, where it's to be sent to. It's an email with Hank, and I'll put that into the chat now for you as well as a template for the business model canvas. I know it'll be all up on the website, but I'll just put it in the chat here just so that you have it as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Anna. Okay, so if we look at the business model canvas and the value proposition canvas, so with how these relate to each other, if you like. So in the middle here, the business model canvas, we say that it helps you create value for, which helps you to understand the context in which you create value for your business. Now, and I'm going to cover this in a session later on in the week. So the environment is everything that's outside of your control, essentially. So that's the world economic situation. That's the regulation that's coming at you, and perhaps that is, the state of the economy in any given country, where you might have a booming economy or an economy that's struggling along. It could be Trump tariffs. It could be competition, and what your competitors are doing, etc., etc. So there's lots of different things that will feature within that environment map. Okay, so that's when you zoom out from the business model canvas. When you zoom in, Alexander Osterwalder, or Alex Osterwalder, and Yves Pigneur determined that the value proposition canvas and the customer segment canvas in particular required a greater degree of understanding, required understanding in a more granular format. So they come up with this tool called the value proposition canvas, which is essentially a plug-in, if you like, to the business model canvas. So, as I say, it's a plug-in, and there is a need for this greater understanding to achieve what they term as fit, so that the value proposition is very much aligned to the needs of the customers. So, just to explain this in a little more detail. So, let's look at the right-hand side here first, the customer profile. So, within the context of any idea, customers are trying to achieve certain things. There are certain things that customers are trying to achieve, and those are known as the customer jobs. With those customer jobs, they're experiencing, or we hope or anticipate that they're experiencing pains. Things that are causing them hassle or grief, things that are costing them money, things that are costing them time, things that are there and they would rather they weren't there, basically. So these are our assumptions around our idea. Customers are trying to achieve certain things and they're experiencing pains. They also there are things that they would like to have that they currently cannot achieve or cannot attain. And so those are the customer gains. So as a first pass for any idea, we try to come up with our best guess assumptions on what those customer jobs are, what the pains they're experiencing are, and what the gains that they're looking for might be. Okay, so that's our customer profile. From a value proposition perspective, our idea is centered around a product or a service. So our products or services need to have within them pain relievers or gain creators. So those pain relievers need to address pains that we guess at the beginning customers have. And the gain creators need to create those gains that we are guessing customers are looking for. Okay, so your first pass at this will be coming up with your best guesses around what are the customer jobs, pains and gains, and what might our pain relievers and gain creators be. Because fundamentally, we have got to achieve fit between these two sides. Okay, and fit is achieved when your value propositions alleviate extreme pains and create essential gains that customers care about. So we need to be asking ourselves all the time, are we addressing extreme customer pains or are we addressing essential customer gains? And how do we determine all of that? Once we've come up with our guesses, is through customer discovery or through other market testing means. We go out there to validate whether those customer pains, whether those customer jobs are real and relevant, whether those customer pains exist and how extreme are they, and whether those gains that customers are looking for hold true, if you like. And then we need to take action to ensure that our idea is shaped by all of that. And that's when you are in the very desirable phase of having achieved fit. Okay, so this is the plugin. So simple example. Hilti, company hopefully you're all familiar with. They make big power tools essentially. Large drills and Kango hammers and heavy duty construction equipment. Okay, so going back a number of years to the time of the downturn, Hilti experienced a downturn. Construction industries across many countries came to a standstill, and they had an ambition to grow their business. So they looked at various models to enable them to do just that. And when they went out and talked to their customers to understand those customer jobs, so what are the customers trying to achieve? They want to execute contracts. They want to, in the context of Hilti and what Hilti does, they want to commit to deadlines. So these customers are large construction companies, essentially, or large and medium-sized construction companies. They wanted the customers wanted them to enable, project calculation, accurate project calculation, and they wanted to schedule the availability of tools, so the tools weren't creating inefficiencies within operations. From a present state perspective, at that time, the pains that they were experiencing were broken tools, project delays, upfront investment was seen as a pain. We had to buy these tools outright at the beginning. Theft of tools was a problem. Penalty costs, late projects, perhaps as a result of some of the inefficiencies created around tooling issues and the stress of it all. Were all pains. In terms of the gains that some of these customers were looking for, they wanted access to the newest tools all the time. They wanted predictable costs because tools was becoming was an issue with from a cost perspective. They wanted profitable contracts, obviously, and they wanted 100% uptime of tools. They didn't want tools lying in storage, not working, not operable, etc., etc. So taking all of that information, they went away and they came up with this concept of an online fleet management system. So essentially, software where there was a model of supplying or leasing or subscriptions, paying a subscription for access to tools. So as part of this model, in terms of the pain relievers, there was no cost for repair and replacement. So you paid your fee, your monthly fee, and you didn't have to pay for repair or replacement if there was an issue. So it was all built into the model. So that directly addressed the pain of broken tools. They had a subscription model. So there was no longer a need for an upfront investment. You paid for access to these tools over time. And that addressed the pain of upfront investment directly. They built in the fact that it was going to be all new or newish tools. So they were offering access to a modern fleet as a game creator, and that could be mapped across to access to newest tools, which was the gains that these customers had said or articulated that they were looking for. There was immediate tool replacement, and that was or gave the 100% uptime. There was obviously a rule of engagement around all of that. And there was sound cost management, so the costs were predictable, addressing that gain that customers had articulated that they were looking for. But you can see how when you look at all of this in much more granular detail, that then you can come up with pain relievers and gain creators that can be mapped across. And that's when you're in the zone of fit between the customer jobs, pains and gains, and what you're offering as a product or service with those pain relievers and gain creators built in. Okay, so you can look at this, and customer discovery is very much about focusing in on the right-hand side here of the value proposition canvas. You can focus this within large organizations. So taking the example that I spoke about to Sandra earlier, healthcare diagnostic as an example. So you can look at a healthcare organization that might be a potential customer for your solution. And you can look at it in terms of, well, who are all of the personas within that organization that might be influenced by my solution or will have, their own specific customer jobs, pains and gains that I need to think about. And the clinical team could have a set of customer jobs, pains and gains that are very different to the lab team, that are very different to the budget holder, the person or the department who's in charge of procuring solutions along these lines from a diagnostic perspective. So you can see, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this just because, we're in a relatively short session. But like the clinical team wants to diagnose patients quickly and accurately. They want to plan treatment with confidence. They want to monitor progress. They want effective teamwork. They want, good patient communication. Prior to the diagnostic, the new innovation coming in, they were experiencing delayed results. They were experiencing inconsistencies. They were experiencing unclear results. There was communication gaps. These were pains. They wanted real-time info as a gain that they didn't currently have. They wanted personalized diagnostic information as a gain. They wanted proactive monitoring, not reactive monitoring. They wanted actionable insights, real-time decision support. And you can take that and compare that perhaps with the lab team, who wanted adherence to standards, who wanted consistent results, who wanted, reporting and communications is a big part of their role. These are the things that they needed to achieve or wanted to achieve. They wanted an efficient workflow. The pains
Sorry,
they were
Kieran,
experiencing.
to
Yeah.
interrupt there, but just Sandra can see the clinical team slide.
All right, so
Slide
it's just back
content.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the clinical team there, Sandra. If you want to take a screen grab an image or take a photograph. And as I say, the lab team then, quite different. Slow turnaround, tedious reporting, human error. These were pains. Equipment malfunction were pains. In terms of the gains, they wanted predictive diagnostics, more insight. They wanted automation of routine tasks. They wanted recognition. Lab team felt they weren't being recognized for the role that they played. They wanted built-in quality control, etc. And then similarly, the budget holders. The budget holder had a completely different set of customer jobs, pains, and gains too. They obviously had strategic decision making in terms of what they needed to achieve. Cost-effective diagnostics. So they wanted good diagnostics, but it had to be cost-effective. They wanted to optimize the resource allocation. They had a fixed budget, and they needed to optimize all of that. They wanted improved healthcare outcomes as a key metric. So they wanted to maximize the return on investment. And similarly, they had their own pains and their own gains also. So I'm not going to go into the detail of all of this, but you can see how this as a tool is very valuable, or can be very valuable, in helping you to understand customers better from a customer jobs, pains, and gains perspective.
Sorry, Sandra has just shared the last slide there where she could see, I think just some of it maybe was missing there, Kieran, if you want to take a look at the chat there.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, don't worry about the right-hand side. The right-hand side is just my view of you guys. So that bit along the right-hand side is just all of the participants on the program. So you're seeing, I suppose, the bit that you need to see there, Sandra. It's just those customer jobs, pains, and gains. And look, this was something that I just created as a generic. So it isn't a specific project that I was working on at any given time. So it is just something that I'm just using by way of example to demonstrate that it's a worthwhile exercise, not just to do the value proposition canvas and work out what those customer jobs, pains, and gains are from a best guess perspective at the beginning, and then to use that then as a way of validating or invalidating those customer jobs, pains, and gains as you go through a customer discovery journey. But it's also giving you an appreciation that there is also value in looking at it from the individuals within the our target customer organization, to understand what each of their customer jobs, pains, and gains are too. So it's as I say, it's a generic example to demonstrate those key considerations. And fundamentally then, as I said, your products and services need to be mappable. They need to be able to map across to those customer jobs, pains, and gains, and to achieve that very valuable and necessary fit that I talked about. And through customer discovery, you'll iterate as you go along. So some of the customer jobs that you thought customers wanted to achieve may not be that important to customers at all. Some of the pains that you thought those customers had, those customers may not have. It mightn't be important to them. They may not be strongly motivated towards procuring a solution. Or you might come up with a whole new set of customer jobs, pains, and gains that you weren't aware of. And it's only, as I say, through going out there and having those conversations and validating or invalidating the customer jobs, pains, and gains that you'll come to that view. So you use this as a tool, and you'll adjust and you'll redesign as you go along, to get to the point where you have something that will offer you a greater chance of succeeding as a startup. The whole idea of a customer job, this whole concept of a customer job, Alexander Osterwalder came up with this when he heard a lecture by this gentleman, a Harvard professor by the name of Clay Christensen. So Clay came up with this concept when he was undertaking a job for one of the large fast food organizations who had a particular challenge around selling milkshakes. And so I'm going to play this short video, very worthwhile for anyone who's interested in startups and some of the lessons that flowed from that. And I'll show you on the next slide the impact that taking this perspective has or had on this particular project.
We decided that the way we teach marketing is at the core of what makes motivation difficult to achieve. The most helpful way we've thought of it so far is that we actually hire products to do things for us. And understanding what job we have to do in our lives for which we would hire a product is really the key to cracking this problem of motivating customers to buy what we're offering. So I wanted just to tell you a story about a project we did for one of the big fast food restaurants. They were trying to goose up the sales of their milkshakes. They had just studied this problem up the gazoo. They brought in customers who fit the profile of the quintessential milkshake consumer, and they'd give them samples and ask, could you tell us how we can improve our milkshakes so you'd buy more of them? Do you want it chocolatey or cheaper, chunky or chewier? They get very clear feedback. They would then improve the milkshake on those dimensions, and it had no impact on sales or profits whatsoever. So one of our colleagues went in with a different question on his mind, and that was, I wonder what job arises in people's lives that cause them to come to this restaurant to hire a milkshake. So we stood in a restaurant for 18 hours one day and just took very careful data. What time did they buy these milkshakes? What were they wearing? Were they alone? Did they buy other food with it? Did they eat it in the restaurant or drive off with it? It turned out that nearly half of the milkshakes were sold before 8 o'clock in the morning. The people who bought them were always alone. It was the only thing they bought, and they all got in the car and drove off with it. So to figure out what job they were trying to hire it to do, we came back the next day and stood outside the restaurant so we could confront these folks as they left milkshake in hand. And in language that they could understand, we essentially asked, excuse me, please, but I got to sort this puzzle out. What job were you trying to do for yourself that caused you to come here and hire that milkshake? And they'd struggle to answer, so we'd then help them by asking other questions like, well, think about the last time you were in the same situation, needing to get the same job done, but you didn't come here to hire a milkshake. What did you hire? And then as we put all of their answers together, it became clear that they all had the same job to do in the morning, and that is they had a long and boring drive to work. And they just needed something to do while they drove to keep the commute interesting. One hand had to be on the wheel, but somebody had given them another hand and there wasn't anything in it. And they just needed something to do while they drove. They weren't hungry yet, but they knew they'd be hungry by 10 o'clock, so they also wanted something that would just pull down there and stay for their morning. Good question. What do I hire when I do this job? You know, I've never framed the question that way before, but last Friday I hired a banana to do the job. Take my word for it, never hire bananas. They're gone in 3 minutes, you're hungry by 7:30. If you promise not to tell my wife, I probably hire donuts twice a week, but they don't do it well either. They're gone fast, they crumb all over my clothes, they get my fingers gooey. Sometimes I hire bagels, but as you know, they're so dry and tasteless. Then I have to steer the car with my knees while I'm putting jam on them, and then if the phone rings, we got a crisis. I remember I hired a Snickers bar once, but I felt so guilty I've never hired Snickers again. Let me tell you, when I come here and hire this milkshake, it is so viscous that it easily takes me 20 minutes to suck it up that thin little straw. Who cares what the ingredients are? I don't. All I know is I'm full all morning and it fits right here in my cup holder. Well, it turns out that the milkshake does the job better than any of the competitors, which in the customers' minds are not Burger King milkshakes, but it's bananas, donuts, bagels, Snickers bars, coffee, and so on. But I hope you can see how, if you understand the job, how to improve the product becomes just obvious.
Sadly, Clay is no longer with us. But it's an interesting way of framing your idea. What job is my customer looking to hire my idea to do? Does that job exist? And if it does, what is it? And how can I find out? In the milkshake example, what they did was they made the milkshake slightly thicker to take longer than the 20 minutes to finish. They actually changed the diameter of the straw ever so slightly, making it slightly smaller, reducing the diameter ever so slightly. And again, just to prolong that experience a little bit. They put some tiny chunks of fruit into it to add some extra unpredictability to the morning routine. One of the other things that came out of the questions that they asked was around just efficiencies and time. These people were going to work, they didn't want to be held up in queues, etc. So they moved the dispensing machine from behind the counter to the front, so those people didn't. So some of the key considerations around customer jobs, pains and gains are the importance of the job, the severity of the pain, the relevance of the gain, how badly they would like that gain, and obviously the fit aspect that I've been stressing. And is it important enough to pay for a solution? Is it a must-have as opposed to perhaps a nice-to-have? And all of that's determined through a process of customer discovery, getting out of the office, getting out of the lab, or getting onto Zoom or Teams to have these meaningful conversations with people that are, very familiar with and closer to the customer jobs, pains and gains. So look, the value proposition, as a next stage then is very, very important. Describing your solution, not as a milkshake or not as a software or not as a diagnostic, but as the benefits or value that customers can expect from a solution. So the first thing is, what problem are you solving? And then what is your value proposition? So some simple examples here of what isn't a value proposition, and I've seen every version of this on business model canvases down that middle column. So our system uses nanomaterial infused polymer membranes for precision humidity modulation. That might sound very exciting to someone that's involved in this kind of technology development, but it describes a feature of the technology and not the customer outcome. There's no clear link to a job, pain or gain, and there's no indication of why this might matter to the user or the buyer. So within your value proposition assumptions, I'd like to see how it addresses a specific job, or I'd like some way of framing it so that I can understand that. So here's a good example. We believe we can reduce post-harvest spoilage losses for fresh produce exporters by improving humidity and ethylene control in storage and transit. So that addresses a specific job, preserving product quality. It reduces the pain, the spoilage-related revenue loss, and it offers a tangible gain, higher saleable yield and shelf life. Okay. Sorry, bear with me. Another couple of simple examples. Our solution uses predictive analytics, edge computing, and industrial IoT integration to monitor asset health. And this was an actual value proposition assumption that was pulled from a business model canvas that was submitted to me. So it's a feature stack. It's not a statement of value. There's no indication of why it matters or to whom. There's no connection to outcomes or solving real world problems, and so it's not a good value proposition. Whereas we believe we can reduce unplanned maintenance costs and downtime for manufacturing firms by predicting equipment failures before they occur using sensor-driven machine learning models. So the job is keeping operations running effectively. The pain is the unexpected equipment breakdowns and the repair expenses and the costs, etc. And the gain is the improved reliability and better scheduling. So I have a good, clear understanding of where the value might be here for this. Whereas in the first one, I have no understanding of where the value is at all. Okay. So again, generative AI can be quite good in helping and assisting to come up with our value proposition assumptions. So very simply, using something like ChatGPT, you can put in, I'm developing a solution that, and give your best description as to what it is or what it does. And you could ask it to give me 5 to 7 value proposition assumptions in the format of, we believe we can achieve this outcome for who. So you have given it your solution description, and you're putting in, we believe we can, and put it in brackets, achieve this outcome for, in brackets, who. You're avoiding technical or feature focused answers with this. So you're asking it to avoid technical or feature focused answers, and you're asking it to focus on results and impact. And you're also telling it, look, if you have any queries before answering. So in other words, if the ChatGPT has anything that it's unsure about, it's designed to give you a response regardless and ignore any uncertainties that it might have. So you can give it an opportunity to ask or to ask you a question before giving you that response too. But this can be a good way of coming up with your initial version value proposition assumptions. Now, as I said to you earlier, you'd want to sanity check those, you'd want to challenge those, you'd want to tweak those and come up with your own revised version. But it can be a time saver. Canvanizer. Canvanizer is a platform that up until a couple of years ago, I just would have used as a simple tool online for developing the business model developing a lot of these canvases, be it a lean model canvas or a value proposition canvas or a business model canvas. So it's just a way in which a team can log on and all work on the same canvas. There's a shared language. It's simple and easy to use, and you can also then send it as a read-only to perhaps a funder or someone that's working with you as a consultant or whatever. But in recent years, it has developed its own sort of AI functionality. And if I can have a go with this, I'll stop the share. And I'll share a different screen and maybe just share my screen. That might do it. Okay. Just going to share my. Sorry. Let me just exit out of this. Okay. So. Okay. There is. Let's move this out of the way. So you can all see my Canvanizer screen. Yeah. So I've just gone in and asked it to create a business model canvas. And then it comes up with this prompt to say, and this is a paid version of Canvanizer, by the way, so jumpstart your canvas creation. So it will actually create a canvas for you, a first version, a first pass canvas for you. You can either start it from scratch yourself, or you can ask it to generate a first pass. So I put in here a project I worked on. So an AI behavioral support platform that helps leaders navigate complexity, make faster decisions in the moment, and build emotional confidence. And so this was a project I did for a professor in Trinity College, Dublin. I'm just doing this by way of example. Okay, so create canvas with AI. Okay. So you can see here, it has come up with value proposition assumptions. It has come up with the customer segments. Now I can go into each of those and make changes, amendments. I can further inform it around certain things that might be relevant. Like for example, I could ask it for segments, customer segments, like say for example, financial services, or large manufacturing companies, or large global multinationals, or SMEs. I can ask it to redo that based on certain things. But fundamentally, this gets me over the blank page challenge just of having to start all of this myself. And some of them might be pretty good, and others might be off the mark. But at least it gives me something to iterate from. And it does that for all of the columns within the business model canvas. And it gives me the costs and the revenue streams as well. So it's a useful starter for 6, and something that I'm using more often these days, and something that I'm also using as part of training sessions, so that people are being trained to do it in the right way, as opposed to going off and do it themselves and perhaps not getting it right. Okay. So let me just come back to. Now, in the same way that if you were developing your own business model canvas, the first version of this will be guesses, best guesses, and you will take anything that generative AI gives you as guesses. You won't be taking that as this is how it is. Okay, so you won't be building anything without talking to people. So there's no getting around the need for customer discovery. Customer discovery is an absolute essential part of this process. And adopting the customer perspective is the guiding principle for the entire business model design process. So for all of these columns within the business model canvas, the customer perspective should inform the value proposition, assumptions, the distribution channels, the customer relationships, the revenue streams. The business model will always be built on customer insights. The lean startup methodology deployed using the business model canvas allows you to hypothesize, first of all, come up with your own best guesses, and then use that as a tool to iterate from and to validate or invalidate. But the customer perspective is going to be built, should be deployed throughout it. And you know, quite often I'm pulled into projects for startups that perhaps have secured VC funding. And, you know, I'll be asked questions like, I'm still not entirely sure what to charge. Or, you know, from a healthcare perspective, which can be quite complex, I'm still not sure who my customer is. And the first thing I'll always say to them is, well, okay, show me your business model canvas. And, you know, quite often you'll get I haven't really looked at that in a long time. Or I did one of them last year, but I haven't revisited it. And that's where the project is falling down, because ultimately it has to be used as a tool, not as a tick box exercise. You know, this isn't something that you just develop, best guess, great, I've ticked a box, I've done it, and, you know, the funder is happy or the tech transfer office is happy. This is very powerful when it's used as a tool. And as a tool, you're always challenging the content within each of those boxes to get to a closer version of what will work and what will be most successful, or what will maximize your probability of success, or what will enable you to scale in a way that perhaps you wouldn't have scaled otherwise. So it's a very, very important tool for anyone that's serious about progressing their startup. Okay. As I said, a lot of your own generated assumptions, and indeed a lot of the AI generated assumptions, will be wrong. I would hazard a guess and say 70, 80 to 80% of your guesses will be wrong. So you can see how a lot of startups fail when a lot of those guesses that they a lot of those decisions they take on the back of guesses without having done customer discovery or without having done adequate customer discovery. You can see how a lot of these startups fail. So it's through using tools like this and then challenging all of those assumptions through a process of customer discovery that you increase the probability of success and you reduce the likelihood of failure. Challenging assumptions through customer discovery is the path to the truth. This is a US project. This was their version 8 of the business model canvas. And you can see lines through things that they had in there. You can see things that they've added. You can see little green ticks where they've validated certain things. They've added new things, etc., etc. So important that you think of this as a tool, and important that you work through a number of iterations of it to get to the truth. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Can I ask, if we've covered a lot of ground this morning, and I appreciate that and understand that. Can I ask, has anyone any questions, any burning questions they'd like to switch off their mic and ask just in an open forum? All is clear as day.
Clear as mud.
Does anyone
Kieran,
want to just, yeah, Ian?
Yeah, I suppose again, not just my one, but the especially the medical devices and that kind of area. When you're putting together this, trying to phrase it, for what is seen as, say, a non-technical people. What if it's like technical people that actually make the decision? How do you combine those two things, if you know what I mean? Like, so if you're trying to get in the door with the non-tech intro, but if ultimately it's going to be dealt with somebody, who's dealing with the issue on a technical level,
Yeah.
How do you frame those two
Well, I
pieces?
mean, you know, Ian, that funding applications typically will cover off the commercial side, so the business side. But quite often, if it's an innovation funding pot that you're applying for, there will be a need to describe the innovation in the context of how it might be um, novel, how it might be more innovative. You know, what is the you might be asked for certain things like, can you demonstrate the novelty? Is there a patent here? Is there have you is there a technical challenge that you've overcome, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of that will be covered off in certain funding instrument application documentations. This whole topic is very much focused on commercialization. So it's focused on startups, it's focused on spin-outs, it's focusing on demonstrating that there's actually a market need, and then there is a market motivation, and then there is an opportunity that will allow a business to come along and scale. So determining if that need is met or not. So that's what a lot of this is around. And the technical feasibility, the technical novelty, and all of that. I mean, you're right. We know in Ireland, for example, that Enterprise Ireland has its commercialization fund, where researchers in Ireland can apply for funding to develop an idea to spin out stage. And within that application documentation, there is a section whereby you need to describe the novelty, you need to describe the technical breakthrough, you need to describe the what's different piece from a technical perspective. And that's typically where that will be covered off. That type of thing wouldn't typically be covered off in a business model canvas or a value proposition canvas, but the unmet need would. And it doesn't always require a very sophisticated technology to address an unmet need. And so a lot of these tools are very much focused on the commercialization aspect, and the technical aspect and the defensibility and the competitive advantage and all of that can be brought to bear on in some of the other documentation. Now, there is a tool called the Lean Canvas. And the Lean Canvas is arguably a better tool for very early stage projects. And what the Lean Canvas has, instead of customer relationships and customer channels, it has a section there called Unfair Advantage. And that's where you're allowed to, or where you can articulate something that gives you an unfair advantage. And that unfair advantage might be a technical breakthrough. That unfair advantage might be a patent. It might be something that's technically a potential barrier to someone else coming along and doing it. Does that make sense, Ian?
Yeah, that's very helpful, Kieran. Yeah, thanks.
Great. Now, look, you can pick or choose which canvas you want to use. If you're very early stage, yeah, I think there's merit in the Lean Canvas as opposed to the business model canvas. But invariably, you will end up using the business model canvas when it comes to looking at it from a business model perspective. I think we're going to be cut off in a minute or two, are we, Anna?
Yeah, in 2 minutes. So big thank you all for today, and thank you, Kieran, for the delivery. That was fantastic. Tomorrow then we have market validation and customer discovery. And we also have a guest speaker joining us at the end of the lecture tomorrow, who is Leah Fletcher, founder and CEO of Dunbar Pharmaceuticals, and also skincare and wellness company Dinanu. So she'll be telling her warts and all story of our customer journey. So that'll be quite interesting. And if anybody has any questions at any time, feel free, in the Q&A or the chat, to pop them into it. Sean, just have something there quickly. Different customers and clients can have different pains, so you are better off creating a business model canvas for each different sector. For example, the pain for school groups visiting a location will be different than active retirement groups.
Yeah, it's a fair point, Sean. I mean, look, you can come along with a technology that has application, or an idea that has application across a number of different sectors, and your canvases can get very, very busy. And, so that might, prompt you to separate out and do a canvas for, if it has application in this sector, do a canvas for that, do a different canvas for a completely different sector. 100% agree with that. And similarly with the value proposition canvas. If you have different segments, you probably want to do a different value proposition canvas and look at the customer jobs, pains and gains for each of those segments.
All right, everybody. So we'll leave it there for today. Have a great day, and we'll see you all tomorrow at 9 a.m. Irish time. I think it's 10 a.m. European time and 11 a.m. Finnish time. And if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to email me. My email was in the chat there as well. See you all.
Folks, thanks everyone.
Thanks a million.
Bye.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.